I got invited to Riot Games HQ in Dublin to meet the Hytale team in person. There they surprised me with a bunch of new information about Hytale's online social aspects, in-universe lore, and some insanely cool new mobs. Plus, I even got to see a few minutes of brand new game footage during a presentation which we're gonna break down in this video. I honestly can't believe I just said those words after all these years. This was genuinely a dream come true and such an awesome experience. I really do appreciate the team for inviting me and being so hospitable. So first, to help give a bit more context, here's the story of how this all came to be. Last month, I got a surprise call from Noxie, the CEO of the team, who asked if I wanted to fly out to Dublin to meet Hypixel Studios for their annual team meetup referred to as HyCon. Specifically, it was to do an entire presentation to the team by Riot Games headquarters, which you can expect to see on the channel very soon. Of course, I jumped at this opportunity, despite not really ever doing public speaking, like ever. But I mean, if I was going to do it about anything, I thought I might as well be doing it about Hytale, right? So I flew to Dublin for a couple of days, did the talk after preparing it with Buddha, and even got to surprise the whole team beforehand as they weren't told I was coming. The talk lasted for a whole hour and focused on why Hytale is so important to the community and the players waiting for it. I went through about 60 slides and got to share a lot of mine and your thoughts about this 5-year-long wait. Thankfully, it all went really well, and afterwards, I got a chance to chat with a bunch of the team members, new and old, people like John, who, before you ask, no, I didn't ask to see his Hytale tattoo. It's a funny joke, but you try meeting someone as big as him for the first time and then randomly requesting to see his leg. I also met people like Moo, Kieran, Sundown, Propsy, Dre, Goblin, Oscar, some team members which I've been following for years, but also many who started out in this very community, or in a few cases, even watched my videos to prepare for their interviews for the team, which I found so interesting. Noxie then also thought it would be funny to surprise me back by revealing that they had prepared a little presentation of some brand new information and gameplay to show me. So in a kind of science fair style layout, they led me through to a big white room with nothing but a monitor. It was just me, Noxie, Buddha, the community manager, Chris, the narrative lead, Monte, the creative director, and Righteous Pebble, a community member that has now been hired as an artist. Chris, Monte, and Pebble were the ones that led this presentation, opening the first slide to show a 4-minute video of gameplay footage, like actual gameplay. This was their external playtest, and throughout the video I heard players refer to each other by number, saying things like, "I got you 37" or "Come with me 32", so it was a decent amount of players, and the video itself was a montage of several different player POVs as they participated in this combat playtest. They were all in a voice chat, they were each vetted players with several different gaming backgrounds, and this was actually the team's first external playtest of the Legacy engine and involved loads of really cool details and moments. The video opened first with a player customizing their character and realizing just how in-depth it was. He's quiet for a moment and then asks, "How long do we have?" with the whole room of players starting to laugh afterwards. I did notice some small changes, but the character creator as a whole was the same as in the trailer. The overall UI was still the same, but there was definitely a larger selection of items compared to what we've seen before. It makes sense, you know, that they've expanded there, but you can even see some of those new items on the character creator's sticker sheets I was given by the team during the trip, such as this Viking helmet, a bunch of extra accessories, and then is that a waffle hat with ice cream? Either way, I can't wait to scan these and start putting together different combinations. We may even do that on stream one day. Back to the footage, the players then spawned onto a floating island type map with some ruined castle structures. This was clearly a map the team were using for this combat prototype. Please understand as well, there were quite a lot of cuts in this video and a lot of chaotic movement, as is the nature of PvP. Plus, I was really excited at the time, so I've tried my best to recall everything that I saw. From what I remember, it started out with some training exercises in a kind of courtyard. There were some classic training dummies that players were attacking, something right out of an MMO. Each hit causing the dummy to react and shake. Then for the rest of the video was mostly general PvP, with players fighting one another. It was like they were just let loose on this map. There was a good amount of players running around together and fighting, of course, as they jumped across islands, explored these sort of castle-like ruins, and it was clear at this point that the controls had come pretty quickly to the players, as they were already using animations and crouching to communicate. They then went on to duels, like 1v1s and 2v2s, and towards the end, they even even had a standard team deathmatch. It was clear that the game was still a work in progress at the time of being recorded, as there were some placeholder textures. For example, a lot of the players had these colored sticks that kind of looked like lightsabers, ironically, but I believe they were just swords without textures, likely to help the player insights team analyze the footage and combat movements of each individual tool and player when rewatching the test. So yes, just as a reminder, this was an early playtest, so all of the gear being used was being very closely looked at, including powers and gadgets, which we'll talk about shortly. There were a few other weapons like bows, maces I think. Some players had potions that appeared to give them strength and speed boosts, kind of like buffs. And I did see some new weapons, like some with full textures. These included a long-range crossbow-like turret, which one player was wielding in the footage, even using it to waste another player. And while it's not new, some players did have bows, with one particularly skilled player trying to shoot targets during the training in mid-air. And during a 1v1, they even pulled out some kind of Valorant-style trick shot by setting up a trap and then jumping back around in the air to shoot a player as they got stuck. We then cut to a player POV of actually using the bow, and I just remember it feeling so satisfying, charging and shooting arrows. It really felt impactful. Moving on from that, we had some players throwing daggers, which we've not seen in a long time. The player on screen was literally throwing them at a super fast rate, like they were spamming them at one another. Bringing it to armor, a few players did actually have different armor sets from what I recall, but I didn't see any footage of them opening chests to get it, so I think that actually happened off screen. The video then moves to a clip of the team during duels as they use magic. At this point, I was trying to pay attention to the weapons and the movement, and then suddenly I just saw a fireball shoot past my screen. This was like a rudimentary fire spell that the players were using, and it really didn't take long before they started using it strategically, as one player cast it onto the ground to damage multiple players around them. There was also a great clip where we see a player taking damage and another player running in saying, I got you, and casting a bunch of green cross particle effects, like first aid, with the player being fully healed and saying thank you afterwards. I actually saw this quite a bit, but hadn't even realized, again with so much happening. But yeah, so healing spells that you can use on yourself and other players or mobs is confirmed. There were also a few, I guess, traps, I want to call them, where a player would place down a kind of root-like trap on the floor or a spider web at one point in order to slow the players, which was really nice to see. But yeah, it was clear at this point that there was one crucial thing happening. The players were having fun. You could hear them laughing along as they blasted each other off the map or practiced things like the dashing ability, which we've seen before in combat footage. There were clearly lots of ways to move around and traverse the area, and the players were enjoying trying to combine all of that with combat and spells. There was even a player during one clip who started spamming the dash ability in a back and forth direction to keep himself in the air, just flying temporarily to avoid all combat, and then one player slowly looked up and said, WTF? Are you flying? How are you doing that? We did also see multiple locations throughout the test video. The training ground itself was clearly in an area similar to Zone 1, and a lot of combat happened in and around this kind of castle, keep type thing. Genuinely, it was so amazing just getting to see some actual footage of combat from a player perspective, seeing them battle and running around, switching items, jumping here and there. It seemed really complex. In fact, at a certain point, I noticed that the players had actually started strategizing and working together. They would make call-outs, corner the enemy, trying different attack patterns, and even kind of creating classes on the spot, like certain players leaning more towards being healers or others being tanks. They couldn't pick up, drop, or swap items in this game mode that they were playing, but they could customize and build their own kits. We didn't see this in the video, but the team later clarified there weren't any preset classes, but each player was able to create their own loadouts in a box up in the sky above the map, choosing things like their primary and secondary weapon, as well as a special weapon such as a trap. Everything that was going on, like the level of team communication, actually all kind of resembled an esport tournament. It was like this special glimpse into the potential future of competition in the game. It was chaotic, but so fun to follow along with, and I just wish I could have watched it over and over. It was only about 4 minutes of gameplay. I say only like that's nothing, but it clearly lasted quite a while. So by the end, there was actually a really wholesome couple of clips where everyone goes, "We won, that was so fun, GG," and it seemed like they had a blast playing what they did. With that, they then moved on to the next part, revealing a bunch of lore behind the actual universe of Hytale, using some amazing key art before returning back to screenshots and videos. And before you get worried about spoilers, the team did say there is nothing here that they wouldn't expect us to already find out in the first 15 or 30 minutes of playing Hytale. Anyone super interested in the game may already get a vague idea of what the story is, but even new players should get a grasp of the universe within the first half hour of playing. Okay, so get ready for this. They said that the setting for Hytale is what they describe as a boundless, imaginative realm. That's their universe, and currently their working title for this realm is the Creative Cosmos. They showed one image that was in a previous blog post which was tagged as the Cosmos of Creativity, so it's like this ethereal, colorful space. This space is actually made up of something called creative energy, which exists in a raw prismatic form. Prismatic meaning resembling the colors formed by refraction of light through a prism. This raw energy is actually sentient in a way as well. It has this need, apparently, this need to be used. It actually seeks out these world-shaping creators that also exist in the space, who we of course know are us, the players, known as avatars. It seeks them out to grant its purpose of being shaped into something. And at this point, there was actually a cool graphic on screen. It was similar to a key art which we've seen before, with the energy taking a cube shape in the palm of this avatar's hand, but then we see the same image next to it, except the energy has kind of started to melt and deform into a swirling gas, as if it's malleable and able to be shaped, like the avatar was controlling and bending this energy. And according to the team, avatars use this prismatic energy to form all of the things in Hytale, like their own worlds or their creations. Remember, we know that adventure mode is set on one of these worlds called Orbis, which also has its own creator known as Gaia. We've had confirmation that Gaia is an avatar just like us, tying in the adventure mode's reason for existing and neatly putting its lore into the same universe as things like the creative tools, which are the avatar's magical abilities, and Hytale Online, which is a central hub that aims to connect all the avatars together, specifically in an area which they covered next, called the Capital. Now, the team described the Capital as the beating heart of Avatar society, a giant floating island forged from prismatic energy itself, founded to be the central hub of the Creator Cosmos. In fact, in a concept art I was shown of the work-in-progress Capital, I noticed that this all kind of explains the side view of the island a bit more, and why it looks the way it does. Of course, at the top were these high-rising structures and the large, familiar white castle, whereas underneath the island, it was formed of a giant, jagged, almost crystallized energy, almost as if this raw prismatic energy stuff was finding its form and hardening beneath the Capital. So effectively, everything was fixed on top, but raw and unforged towards the bottom. Again, it really gave off this vibe that it was malleable, like it could be changed or altered. Avatars themselves apparently have a direct impact on what the Capital looks like too, the team saying that many areas of the Capital reflect the actions and popular trends of avatars themselves in that moment. This suggesting that the Capital may shift and evolve in real time, or perhaps in intervals, in order to keep up with the trends of all the players across Hytale. I got to see some concept art and then an in-game screenshot of a new block type that the team referred to as iridescent blocks. These resembled that prismatic energy from before, but again it was more crystallized. Iridescent actually means something that varies in color when seen from different angles, further backing this idea that it is one in the same with that prism-like energy from earlier. These iridescent blocks from the screenshots I was shown actually form the skeleton of the Capital. I was curious about this, so asked the team, and they said it's almost like a permanent through line and a helpful way to direct players. It's one of the only parts of the Capital that stays the same, allowing players to still be able to traverse and find their way around as it winds downstairs and through the streets between buildings and familiar structures. The blocks themselves actually creating a kind of pathway or border, all centering on a circle with a Hypixel H in the center, also made from these blocks. It looked like an entirely upgraded area, kinda similar to what we'd seen in previous showcases, just a lot more realized, a much bigger and more noticeable outline. In one screenshot, there was even a giant, and I mean giant, portal that lingered just to the side of the capital island, and whilst I wasn't told anything about it, it looked hundreds of blocks tall and appeared to be some sort of connection to other spaces or experiences. I guess either the mini-games made by Hypixel Studios, or perhaps a path into other player worlds. I mean, to quote the blog post from last year, the capital will be where avatars come together to make friends, share experiences, compete in mini-games, discover new adventures, which I think may be where the giant portal leads, seek challenges, trade, show off pets and companions, plus a lot more. It's clearly intended to be this big social hub of Hytale. The capital still had this big castle-like structure that we've seen a few times, and along with the giant portal I mentioned earlier, they seem to be two of the main staples of the map, because the map really wasn't staying the same. The team said specifically, the capital has this air of a festival, like a music festival or a really big convention. There's always something happening, and there's even specific creative traditions, which I'm sure we'll soon come to learn about. Maybe even specific events, holidays, or even scheduled activities that people can log in to participate in. The team then showed me another video. This time it was a shot of the capital from the ground floor, from a player perspective. There was this particular look, theme, or kind of color palette to everything, but all of a sudden, a huge animated wave overlapped all of the blocks, like a shockwave of glowing energy, which transformed the textures of all the blocks and buildings in the video. It was like seeing a before and after shot of the capital as it had changed to reflect a new time or theme. The team basically said I had just seen the capital changing to reflect the enthusiasm of avatar kind. So the animation was trying to depict this change, and although I don't think it will look exactly the same in-game, remember that everything I saw was still a work in progress, it still looked really cool, really realized, which I think is super important. After Chris, who again is the lead of narrative for Hytale, wrapped up, Pebble took over to discuss his and the whole team's process for ensuring that each aspect of Hytale is of equal quality. According to the team, all models, animations, and even ideas are taken through 4 levels of quality check, from initial conception phase to fully rendered and ready to be implemented assets. This all came about when the team re-looked at the game as they were beginning to work on the new engine and realized that some things felt more Hytale than others. This system was now in place to ensure that throughout the likely thousands of assets the game will have, that they all maintain that Hytale look and feel. The team actually took me through an example of this with how they came to upgrade the environment of the Scaraks, the bug-like faction from the deserts of Zone 2, which I'll be honest, I wasn't a massive fan of before, but man, has that changed. First, I was shown the initial concept art of the interiors of their nests, starting as basic outlines and concepts. There were about 8 images, all angles or depictions of different situations or areas that could exist in Skarak nests. Things like spindly walkways above foggy pits, twisting caves laced with eggs, and other creepy formations. I vividly remember a grid of concept arts with one image showing a bunch of platforms above this blue glowing goo, one showing some Scaraks sort of maintaining this pool of goo, and there were even some weird growths around that goo. I've said goo too many times. And there were even some weird growths around this shining blue liquid, as if it was some sort of source of life or able to grow creepy insect plants. A lot of the art I saw was showing off this kind of weird glowing blue stuff. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it definitely seemed like you shouldn't touch it. This whole process has helped them realize the Skarak nest interiors a lot more, as they turned from concept sketches into colored key art and then to actual in-game structures. They then showed me what they had come to verify as the new Skarak aesthetic, a large ziggurat-like structure, but with these blue pipes that almost looked mechanical in nature, likely pumping that unusual blue goo around the hive. And I have to theorize that this could maybe be some sort of natural liquid they secrete or produce. Perhaps it's what they feed on, but it seems much more likely that they use it to kind of fuel their hives in some way. The team said they want to ship assets that meet a variety of quality levels, but ensuring that everything within Orbis is at least beyond level 3, which is the quality level in which they would be happy to ship that asset, with level 4 kind of acting as a stretch goal for anything that requires some extra attention to detail. They can use this stage selectively to push certain aspects a bit further, to solidify that Hytale feeling. Again, to show this in action, the team said they wanted to present the huge upgrades they had made to this Scarek faction. Remember, after years that all we've really seen of these creatures is that they were somewhat mindless bugs that didn't exactly live up to the lore they had, apparently being so smart that they enslaved an entire other faction called the Ferens. Well, their upgrade aimed to fix that by making the Scareks a lot more multifaceted and in-depth as a species. One Scarek was shown in a very early conceptual phase, a type of tanky Scarek model, except rather than the one we've seen, which has a giant shield-like face, it had two shield-like arms with sharp pincers on the end of each. As we moved through images which depicted the levels of quality, it became a fully shaped model with textures and then even an animation that much more resembled that of a bug or a scorpion, running forward with one shield arm blocking its face and then another jabbing forward to strike the player. This Scarek was larger as well than any other we'd seen in the game before, and that was only a taste of what was to come. Funnily enough, Pebble didn't actually like the Scareks either, but the revamp was one of his first tasks when he joined the team. A really tough challenge if you'll ask me, but he aimed to improve them drastically through new concept arts and taking each aspect of the faction through those levels of quality, giving them more personality and brains as they coded the behavior and modeled their bodies. In fact, the animation I just said of that pincer Scarek I saw was apparently only level 2 of 4, and despite this, it was clear that Scareks were coming across as much smarter. It seemed like they were actually living, thinking insects that had impulses, certain reactions, and a particular strategy about their movements. It felt like they could think for themselves, and that bodes far scarier for a player wanting to meddle with them. Pebble said that the Scareks now have a lot of new movements, with one being similar to a scorpion when detecting danger ahead of them, some Scareks moving from side to side as they show off their pincer appendages to kind of ward off attackers and make their moves seem less predictable. They're much more bug-like, but also smarter. They feel like they resemble what the lore made them out to be. I mean, I was already pretty stoked by everything I was seeing at this point, but then the team offered to show me a number of brand new Scarek creatures, but this was, at least for me, the coolest part of the whole presentation because it really showed the scale of their reimagining. First was a lineup of some more standard Scareks, similar to the ones we'd seen before, except tweaked with this new aesthetic. Areas of their body now touting this vibrant neon blue color compared to their more dull brown counterparts that were being used before. Particularly one Scarek in this image, a flying locust type, now had large blue wings, a sharp pincer-like glowing blue tail, and a long hair-like mask of defensive skin. The rest of the Scareks on that page looked like upgraded versions of what we'd seen before. They increased in size as the line went on, but I wasn't ready for the next slide, which moved us further along the lineup to 3 giant Scarek variations that we've never seen before. These were huge, towering beasts with all sorts of creepy parts. They almost looked like third stage Pokemon evolutions of what we'd seen before. I'm gonna go through all 3 of them right now. The first appeared to be a redesign of the Scarek tank, now with a much broader and taller shielded head, with 2 glowing antennas sticking out of it. It had 4 legs and 2 large arm-like limbs that had shields of their own attached, like big stomping hooves. Seriously, this kind of reminded me of a bug-like dinosaur in some ways. The underside was this darker blue, this new color of the Scarek's hide beneath the hardened sandstone-like skin on the top. The Scareks all now also had these glowing blue eyes, more in theme with their new bluer aesthetic. The second Scarek along was even taller, much thinner, but again 4 legs, except with 2 or I think even 4 tentacle-like appendages. The body had 2 sections as well, the bottom with the legs, and the top which stood up tall, almost like a centaur, with blue wing-like sticky out parts that almost looked like sensors or a fan that could detect something like vibrations or movement in the air. This Scarek in particular had a helmet-like head, almost resembling a knight of sorts, with 2 really long antennae sticking out, each with a blue tip. We know that Zone 2 is all about wind magic and there potentially being magic within the air, so the fact that these guys have antennae that are all blue maybe means that they can use that wind magic to communicate with one another, and maybe that has something to do with the blue goo that we keep seeing as well. The third, again, was even bigger, a very similar design to the last one, except with 2 much more defined arms, or kind of claws, like really sharp big claws, and its head had an almost emperor-like headpiece that was surrounded by these blue wings. We're talking something much bigger than the Broodmother here. The Broodmother is nothing compared to how crazy this thing looked. Talk about like the alien queen or something. It was so insane. I would love to see this in game. At first, I thought that these blue, weird array things around the heads of the Scarabs were wings, but then I quickly learned from research that these blue wings I keep describing were called tympanum, or tympanal organs. Insects such as crickets, grasshoppers, and some moths have these sort of specialized structures that look like wings, but are actually used for detecting sound or vibrations, as I said earlier. The tympanum functions similarly to an eardrum, picking up sound waves and allowing the insect to sense its environment, making a delve into a Scarab nest in adventure mode much more of a stealth mission now than ever before. All of these new Scarabs not only had big blue eyes, their bodies were also covered in these symmetrical glowing blue dots, which I commented to the team appeared like a hunting mechanism. Imagine being in the darkness, in the depths of a hive, and all of a sudden you see a bunch of glowing blue dots in the shadows, as if there were lots of individual sets of eyes all watching you, only for this giant singular Scarab to lurch forward from the shadows, dwarfing all of your expectations. I really don't think I'm doing it justice, but know that these things were huge. At an estimate, they seem to be at least 2 to 3 times taller than the player. You know, the types of Scarabs you'd find either guarding something very important or down in the depths of the biggest hives. Overall, incredibly dangerous, and most importantly, looked far more complex and smart as a species. Something that you would definitely consider messing with twice before charging in. And this level of upgrade has apparently been executed across all of the factions of adventure mode, from Quebecs and Trorks to Ferens and even the dark and mysterious Outlanders. And of course, I wish I could have seen more of those to give you guys details, but the team did want to keep a limit on just how much I was getting shown. Again, just to reiterate, the team were reassuring me that they didn't want me to be forced to bottle all of this new information up, and that I could share it in a video with you all because it won't be secret for that much longer. I can imagine you'll all get to see more or less exactly what I did sooner rather than later, and again, all of this was only scratching the surface, just mentioning one faction out of the many there will be. Overall, of course, this was all work in progress documentation and previews of what they had been working on before. They're long past this point now, and are likely very close to showcasing the new engine gameplay in its entirety, with things like combat being realized so much more now. Of course, the playtest I saw was only their first, and going by what the team said in the blog post, that test took place quite a few years ago. We know they've been consistently playtesting ever since then, and will surely be moving on to the new engine testing at some point in the near future, if not already. I know that I couldn't play the specific gameplay clips and show the key art that I saw on this video. Of course, they couldn't trust me to run away with a 4-minute MP4 of the playtest. That would just be a little bit too chaotic, and even if I had signed like a contract or something, if I did leak it, then it would just be out there forever, no matter how much they tried to sue me. I want to again thank the team though so much for having me. They were so incredibly nice, even giving me a memento to remember the trip by in the form of a Quebec hoodie and a giant poster of Gaia, which Noxie got the whole team to sign and which I was just completely blown away by. And when I say giant, I really do mean it's massive. It's like 2 meters by 4 meters long. I'm not sure how I'm going to fit it on the wall, but we'll figure it out. I really do think the Hytale season's going to continue. Again, make sure to look out for the video of the presentation I did to the team while I was there. It's a 1-hour talk, which should drop in the next week or so. Make sure to subscribe for notifications when we do get the next blog post. Click the video on screen for more Hytale. Stay safe and keep free.